Ever since Genshin Impact released back in September 2020, a significant number of companies and studios have attempted to replicate its success. Microsoft announced back in 2022 that they were investing into dozens of Chinese gacha studios in an active effort to not only locate, but also partake in the potential success of a Genshin Impact competitor. 2 years later, nothing of note has been achieved. Nintendo recently confirmed as of February 5th, 2025, that they now understand the importance of phone games and their players. Thus, they are refocusing their efforts in an attempt to break into the market so strongly dominated by Hoyo. Hada announced the Genshin Impact inspired, and I use that term very loosely here, Tower Fantasy. A worse looking, worse playing version of Genshin with larger scale multiplayer. GameArk did what Hada did and announced the eerily similar Genshin inspired MMO gacha The Legend of Neverland, even going so far as to rip cities like Mondstadt, promotional material, character models. ByteDance attempted their spin on a Genshin inspired MMO gacha in the way of Crystal of Atlan, which admittedly has yet to release globally but is holding a beta test this month. Heck, you could probably even say games like Noah's Heart, which is now shut down, and perhaps even Ni no Kuni Crossworlds were spun off of Genshin in an attempt to bank on its popularity. I will say, there is a weird obsession with Genshin clones and MMOs. Tower Fantasy, The Legend of Neverland, Crystal of Atlan, Noah's Heart, Ni no Kuni Crossworlds, they were all MMOs, and they all failed for the same reason. MMO and gacha does not work. They do not mix. Evidently, while every single gacha game and studio's attempt to fund a Genshin competitor had failed, it wasn't until Kudo Games, the developers of Punishing Grey Raven, and their announcement of Wuthering Waves that Genshin Impact players saw a threat. Genshin players laughed at Tower Fantasy as it fumbled with hackers, plagiarism, and a lack of identity. Genshin players laughed at The Legend of Neverland because it was a genuinely shit game. Genshin players didn't even bother laughing at Noah's Heart because the game was dead before it even ended its first month of release. And Crystal of Atlan? Well, I'm sure that'll go the Tower Fantasy route. No gacha game announced survived even a month before seeing a drastic decline, with every gacha falling into obscurity within 6 months of their respective release. Many thought the same would happen to Wuthering Waves, and you know what? Looking at a few images of what the game used to look like, it's not out of the realm of possibility to understand why that is. Here is an image depicting the main character of Wuthering Waves, the Rover, through 3 different stages of development. The left image showing a more Genshin style of character, the smaller body, the larger head. I am genuinely glad that they opted for the more realistic style of character model. Here you'll see 3 stages of Baija's development, 2 stages of Mortefi, 2 stages of Yinlin, 2 stages of Chisha, one of the most drastic overhauls admittedly within Wuwa. Scratch that, here's Lingyang, the most significant transformation in the game's history. People did not like the little furry. Well, some people did, but most people did not like the little furry. And finally, 3 different stages of Arena. The original character models were very reminiscent of Tower Fantasy, half-assed, low quality, vastly inferior to Genshin Impact. But it wasn't just the character models. The original game was a lot darker, it was a lot more muted, it lacked any type of vibrancy at all and felt dead. Sure, this would appeal to a demographic of player that wanted that, but if there was one thing Genshin Impact proved, it was that players love bright, vibrant games. The world is dark, grim, and sucks enough without a constant reminder of that in-game as well. So, Kudo heard this, and they made significant alterations. This single change to the design of the characters and the theme of the game overall set in motion a chain of events that would change the genre forever. Before we go any further, I do want to take a moment here to thank all of my incredible patrons over on Patreon and my YouTube channel members who allow for me to continue to do dedicated videos like this every single day. You guys are absolutely phenomenal, and I genuinely cannot thank you all enough for the support. Up until this point, Hoyo, the developers of Genshin Impact, Honkai Star Rail, Zenless Zone Zero had grown complacent. They won. There was no competition to be had anywhere. Nothing came close in terms of quality or content. Wuthering Waves was being written off as just another dead clone, until Kudo debuted a brand new trailer showcasing the significant changes made to the game. I'm sure at this point Hoyo took a second glance. This looked different. This was a little more than just a Genshin clone. It took what Genshin did and improved it. Better looking character models, better looking animations. You could run up walls instead of being locked at climbing. It implemented a real action combat system to rival the likes of Punishing Grey Raven. It offered a more free-to-play friendly gacha system, 80 pulls instead of 90, totaling 160 pulls instead of 180 for a guarantee, no 50-50 on weapon banners, making it exponentially cheaper to acquire a character's signature weapon, the option of purchasing dupes directly from the shop, with currency you acquire through pulling characters. At this juncture, people began to notice. This wasn't shaping up to be just another Genshin clone. This was shaping up to be the first real competitor. Then, Wuthering Waves ultimately launched after amassing over 30 million pre-registered players. As a reference point here, Wuthering Waves was the most pre-registered for gacha game ever, until Zenless Zone Zero launched with approximately 10 million more by the end of its run. Both games totaling Genshin and Honkai Star Rail's pre-registration numbers and then doubling them. Wuthering Waves had its fair share of problems at launch, just like Genshin did, just like Tower of Fantasy did. And while the latter, Tower of Fantasy, ultimately failed, Kudo with Wuthering Waves did the opposite. They managed to fix these issues, quite quickly in most cases. Yet it was the response to these issues that built the foundation of what has since left Wuthering Waves as the crown king of the gacha genre. In an active effort to sufficiently compensate players for lost playtime, translation errors, crashes, Kudo gave out a significant number of rewards. Hundreds of Asterite, 40 standard pulls, 20 limited pulls, a free 4-star weapon selector, and most importantly, a free 5-star character selector. They gave out a free max rarity unit as an apology, meaning potentially significantly less revenue during their launch month, since less people would be spending to acquire the hero they needed. They were willing to take a substantial impact to their revenue to make sure players were adequately reimbursed, something that they definitely did not need to do. Shortly after this, Kudo went down to confirm that they had heard player feedback and were taking it into consideration. They would be adding a skip button to main story missions, something that Genshin Impact still doesn't possess, even though players have been asking for it for 4 years now. This spawned the devs listen meme and triggered the game's rise into the monolith that it has become today. Version 1.1 didn't add a whole lot, as the devs were highly focused on making sure the game was in a fully stable state, but beginning with version 1.2, Kudo completely turned around public perception of the game, beginning with the introduction of the stamina storage system and the 120 FPS option, both highly necessary and market improvements. Version 1.3 introduced story summaries for the story skip feature, collection spot markers on the map, the ability to merge up to 100 echoes together to create entirely new ones, which is incredibly useful given how many trash echoes you acquire while farming. And then version 1.4 hit, bringing with it one of the most important features up until this point, weapon skins, marking the beginning for skin implementation within the game. They improved teleportation directly to boss challenges and tacit fields, introduced a double claim for rewards when grinding the forgery challenge, simulations, and tacit fields, halving the total time it takes to grind. This was an incredible quality of life improvement. They added the ability to see what stats your echoes have upon acquisition. Version 2.0 was perhaps the biggest overhaul of all, causing a complete 180 when it came to public perception of the game. This version was such a critical success that Solon Lee, the CEO of Kudo himself, made a public statement that Wuwa had achieved its highest single-day revenue since the game launched, and was confirmed to have exceeded player expectation. Many players, lovers, and haters considered 2.0 to be a soft reset. It introduced several entirely new methods of transportation, the ability to freely soar through the skies not tied to a single character gated behind paying hundreds of dollars. This drove people crazy with excitement. That's disregarding the echo gondolas, which was another method of transportation. There was a full story skip allowing you to head directly into 2.0 after completing Act 3 of Chapter 1. This allows you to skip quite a bit of the boredom of the 1.0 story. The ability to change freely between male and female rover, mobile synthesis without the need to return to cities, material conversions for excess materials you might have acquired, an immersion mode, completely removing the HUD and allowing you to play without limitations, fully implemented skins, a paid skin for Jinza and a free skin for Sanhua. 2.1 sparked a surge of Genshin could never memes across social media as Kudo confirmed it would introduce Echo loadouts, essentially artifact presets in this version, something that players have been begging Hoyo to implement in Genshin since, well, I'm sure you can imagine. Then there was full ray tracing, an entirely new endgame game mode. Players asked Kudo for changes, overhauls, improvements, and Kudo listened. They listened to what players wanted and made adequate changes to what players wanted rather than what they perceived players wanted. This has left the Wuthering Waves community thirsting for more, with Kudo ever ready to please. And Kudo is showing no signs of slowing down, continuing to implement features into the game that players of its competition has been begging its competitors for as long as they have been playing. This has secured a spot for Kudo and Wuthering Waves at the top, and as a result, has caused Hoyo to make alterations to their games to try and acclimate to the new pressure from its players. This has also been a wake-up call for future Gacha games, proof that they need to listen to their players at this juncture if they want any form of success. This is how Wuthering Waves won the Gacha war. Hey, where do you think you're going? I see what you're doing there. I see you navigating on over, scrolling on over to that X button. Don't you dare. What I need you to do is take a moment and click one of the videos that are about to appear as soon as I'm done talking. And trust me, you're gonna want it.